Growing up as a kid, I had a very strict and religious mother, so as you could imagine, she made it her duty to naturally keep me away from such unholy things. Girls, friends, sleepovers, and video games was one of those things. You'd think that with the vast knowledge I have about certain video games, and my opinions on them, that wouldn't be the case. And the reason for that is because, well, like my brothers, I'd play them in secrecy. I grew up in a household with 5 other siblings. None of us had toys because, well, to our mother, they were satanic, symbolical, or such things. There weren't TV shows we could watch. There weren't comic books we could read. There weren't toys we could play with. There weren't friends we could hang out with. In fact, I remember when Pogs became popular, my oldest brother, in secrecy, would go out and buy some, and play with them and trade them with friends. He'd come home and show them to me and my younger siblings. They were the closest things we had to toys. And of course, our mother eventually discovered we had them. I remember that day she absolutely whipped my brother. And don't even get me started on the day she found out he had Pokemon cards. We had to make do with our imagination and each other's company. But it was until my oldest brother went out one day and came back home later that evening with a Sega Genesis and Sonic 2. The memories of seeing Sonic run across the screen as it chimed Sega are still embedded in my mind as if though it were yesterday. And as far back as I could recall, it was my first time ever seeing a video game being played on a screen. When it comes to eating for the first time, smelling for the first time, and seeing for the first time, or even hearing for the first time, those are not memories we can recall. But when it comes to seeing and playing video games for the first time, it's a memory that will last forever. It is a bittersweet joy and sense of wonder. But sadly, as you could imagine, eventually our mother caught on to what was happening and threw them away. As I got old enough, I started going to school and meeting new friends who would talk about video games and the such. I remember one specific friend who would always talk about Banjo-Kazooie. He'd always talk about exploring the big areas and fighting enemies and getting items. I, being the very kid I was, with no access to video games, wanted to see it for myself, so I took it upon me one day to go to his house after school. I remember watching him slap the cartridge in and flicking on the power switch. And well, let's just say that I didn't come home till late that night. I remember the ass beating my mother gave me that night. But as I lay there in bed, with my ass cheeks red and swollen, I couldn't help but think to myself, damn, was that worth it? But what I remember most from that moment in my life was when my older brothers came up to me and they asked me what it was like, how playing the game felt, what it looked like, what it sounded like. And I described every moment of it down to the smallest of details. The glimmer of fascination that sparkled in their eyes is something that I still remember to this day. And it was at that moment that I knew that even with the shortest of time spent around video games, I knew that I absolutely loved them. But sadly, as you could imagine, my mother started picking me up after school. So all accessibility that I had to video games were lost, and I had to experience a long drought of no video games. So in the free time that we did have, we spent it cleaning and doing chores, and we would do the best we could to not tell our mother we were bored, because if we did, she would pull out the Bible and start giving us Bible classes. But when all the chores were done, and our mother was too tired to give us Bible classes, we would do the unthinkable. We'd go outside. If our mother wasn't supervising, we would make our own role-playing games. We'd find different sized sticks and rocks, and then we'd just pull a number out of our ass about how much damage each one did. Our brother would be the owner of the weapons shop, and the currency would be the pearl rocks that were scattered around the yard that we could find. We'd have a yellow notebook that we kept hidden from our mom, and what we would do is we would draw the monsters. That way, whenever we were running around the yard, our brother would shout out the name of the monster and we'd turn to the book to see what it was that we were fighting. And eventually this caught the attention of other kids around the block and they all wanted a part of it. We'd be that house where all the neighborhood kids were at, and the one that all adults would complain about. Sometimes we'd gather as much change as we could and we'd ride bikes down to the local 76. And we'd buy oatmeal pies, warheads, and pop rocks. You know, back then when they were actually good. Yes, I'm a child of the 90s. But when the sun would set and the street lights would come on, we knew we had to be home quick or we'd get our asses whooped. And seeing as how we had no internet and weren't even remotely allowed to touch it, we'd spend the rest of our nights reading books. Not comics, not picture books, but actual books. Looking back, I was an avid reader. I enjoyed reading. It was the closest thing I had to being able to experience something I wasn't allowed to watch. I was always genuinely excited about getting my hands on a new book at the library, and I guess you could say it was through that I was able to form such a broad vocabulary. But if it wasn't books, it was drawing. I spent more hours in my life drawing than anything else I can remember. I wasn't very good at it, and I'm still not, but it was the only thing that didn't feel sacred. It was the one thing I had that couldn't be taken away. But as the years went by and I got older, restrictions put on me got slimmer. Our mother came to a realization that she couldn't control us the same way she did when we were younger. So she eventually caved in. She got cable and internet and a computer. That's where I grew up watching things like Pinky and the Brain, Animaniacs, Doug. I regret that one the most. And as you could imagine, being a kid that never got to watch cartoons growing up, well, going outside became less of a thing. And although we had all these things now and were much older, one rule was still set firmly in place: no video games. Of course, I got around this by going to friends' houses. That's where I first experienced Halo. I had to tell her I was going over to swim for the rest of the day, but that's not what we were doing at all. We'd just buy boxes of Tostinos, and we'd set up an old school Xbox LAN party, and would do nothing but play Halo till 2 in the morning. And as I would just get a taste of what video games were, I knew I wanted them. And of course, I didn't have a job, nor was I even old enough to have one. But my older brothers were, and it was through money that they saved up together that they were able to buy a PS3. And it is from there that all my real gaming began. Demon's Souls, Fallout 3, Call of Duty 4, and I was eventually able to get a DS. And damn, the DS is fucking amazing. The countless hours I spent on things like Metroid Prime Hunters, Zelda, and a bunch of JRPGs. And it was at this point in my life where I started playing things that I missed out on my entire life. And I'm still catching up to this day. So with all that said, what am I getting at here? Well, I guess you could say that to some degree, I'm thankful that my life went the way it did. Would I have preferred to have video games growing up? Well, yes, but I'm grateful I didn't, to a degree. There were so many adventures and great experiences that I had growing up that weren't spent sitting in the living room or on the computer. I was able to do things like learn big words, use my imagination, and be creative. Oftentimes we watch movies where we get to see kids be kids, going outdoors, exploring, causing trouble and mischief, having lightsaber duels on the street, and then having to step on the sidewalk when a car passed by. Well, getting the chance to be that kid, it made me the person I am today. And when I realize how much time I spend day to day on the internet, well, it makes me wish sometimes that I was that kid once again.